حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا على الواصل المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم جميعا. It's an honor and pleasure to be visiting the community here in Kansas City from Colorado. We want to first send, on the occasion that we're celebrating in the births of Imam Husayn alayhi salam, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, and Abbas, peace be upon him. Three champions of Islam, three champions of the Ahlul Bayt. And we send these congratulations to the Imam of the age, Imam Mahdi I was thinking about some commonality about these three pure souls. Something in common that we can take, a lesson that we can learn. Now, one of the important things which we have to always emphasize when we're talking about different munasabat and different events that have transpired in history is not to make them archaic and make them only something that resides in history. We have a responsibility to connect and make relevant for ourselves these matters and the lessons of the lives and teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. We're in danger if we ignore how these connect to us today. What will happen? People will come, they have slogans like Ramadan Muslims, Muharram Muslims. People will come, and on those special occasions, they'll remember the incident as it happened, or they'll learn some things, some history. But they may not necessarily understand, what does that have to do with me in 2019 living in the United States of America? And if we lose that connection, then we have lost a fundamental piece of what Islam is. Because one of the reasons why the justice and adala of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can allow that there is a Khatam al-Anbiya and a last religion and final revelation is because this revelation must be relevant for all times. In fact, it's one of the pride of the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, the concept of ijtihad itself, the concept of deriving the rulings that are relevant to today's issues from Quran and the Sunnah and the tradition and ahadith of the Prophet and the Ma'sumeen. It doesn't matter if it was an issue of camels or an issue of cybercrime or an issue of cloning. Islam has an answer for that. That relativity is the important component, is why Islam will always be the solution to the problems of humanity. It's actually one of the important reasons why secularism itself can be dangerous in concept. If it pushes us away from the Islam which is the solution. So we have to pay attention to this. So when we are remembering and we are marveling in awe of the greatness of the Ahlul Bayt and their fadila and the greatness of who they were, their teachings, we can't leave it to just be greatness in history and not lessons which I can apply to myself. And so when I want to look at one of these things, there's a connecting factor, and that is that their purpose was all the same. Their purpose of doing for the sake and the rida and the pleasure of Allah was all the same. What makes a human being be willing to give a limb or another limb, to give arms for the sake of trying to give water, except that that is for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You know, when you go to buy many things today to get a loan somewhere, we say that they want an arm and a leg. Right? You use that expression, that they want so much from us. For someone to do these things, if it's not for even for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it can even become a problem. The purpose in the actions that we do in this world and being connected to the Ahlul Bayt is understanding what the purpose of those actions are, what the purpose itself is. We have an idea that everything that we do has to be done with this niyat and intention of taqarrub ilallah. I am seeking proximity towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the moment that this intention changes, then that action is no longer beautiful. The fact that, and for the Ahlul Bayt, this intention never changed, this is what made them and their actions always beautiful. This is the reason why the tragic events of Karbala, all of them, all of the struggle, the martyrdom, the lack of water, the sickness of Imam Sajjad, peace be upon him, the trials and tribulations of the caravan to afterwards to Sham, all of these things are the reason why Bibi Zainab says, "Ma ra'aytu illa jameel," that I saw nothing but beauty. Someone might say, is death beautiful? Is this thing beautiful? Is sitting on the chest of Abu Abdullah beautiful? Is losing the limbs of Abbas beautiful? It is the intention to do for the sake of Allah and to seek nearness to Allah, which is beautiful. And that, brothers and sisters, we cannot find better examples than these examples that we have. So we want to pay attention to this and how this relates to us and our lives. Every single action, if you open up any Tawdil Masail, any Risala, any book of practical laws of Islam, from the acts of worship to the parts of contract and agreement, every single act that a person does, its validity is based upon doing it for the sake of Allah. If a person does the same action otherwise or for the sake of someone else, then they lose. There's a story written in one of the books of Akhlaq about a person who struggled with this concept of showing off and riyah. And so he wanted to save himself by removing himself from the environment. So he said, if I go to somewhere that's secluded and there's no people, then there will be no one to show off for. There's a side note and lesson in that itself is that, and I'll come back to that point. But anyway, he goes to this masjid and this abandoned area, this abandoned masjid, and he begins to pray there. He says, now I can finally pray in peace. I don't have to worry about what people are going to say or how much they're going to, if I'm doing this for this person or that person. And as he's reciting his qira'ah and he's making his recitation, he notices some movement behind him and he thinks someone came in, someone is watching me. So he puts on his best pronunciation, his best Arabic, and he goes to his best Abdul Basit impersonation, and he begins to recite and go into his zone. And it says that when he finishes his salah, he realizes that the shadow that he saw was just the shadow of a dog. Sometimes people are doing things غُرْبَةً إِلَى الْكَلْبِ, seek nearness to the dog, not to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The moment you replace Allah with anything else becomes the moment where that action is no longer valid. So someone can make 1,000 rakat salah and it can be invalid only because they did it for people can say mashallah. Someone could give everything they have in charity, everything, and it can be a batil action, an invalid action, if it was not to seek nearness to Allah. So this is a very powerful thing. Every single time in the instances of what happens in the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, there are choices that they are facing, but at every junction they are choosing to do their action which is right and to do it for the right reason, to become closer to Allah. Even as they are already ma'asum and sinless. Because they are setting the example for you and I. That every time we get an opportunity, we have to choose to do this opportunity, to choose for the right reason. And sometimes that's not the easier reason, there's not the easier road. And in fact, the difficulty is a huge, important component. I want to go back to the other point that I wanted to make. We were sitting in the class of Ayatollah Jawadi Amali. He's a great scholar, arif, mufassir of Quran. And in Surah Nahl, he was talking about the bee, the chapter the bee, he was talking about Shaitan, one of the ayat, it escapes me at the moment, but what he said was that Shaitan can be one of the greatest reasons for a person to succeed. Then he explained. And he explained why. He said, see, for the person, if they don't have that trial or that difficulty and they're successful, alhamdulillah, but they did it with ease. But for the person who now has difficulty and is being tested, this person has a greater reward. One of the reasons why the Ahlul Bayt and sometimes people, they misunderstand the concept of having problems in this world. Sometimes we look at problems themselves as being something 100% negative. Someone said to Rasulullah that my daughter, she's never been sick, she's so healthy, alhamdulillah, she's never had a single ailment. And the Prophet responded by saying that I feel sorry for her, woe for her. Why? Because he was saying that those trials and tribulations are the only method of going to the next level of nearness to Allah. Think about this. If you're all in school, how do we decide who is worthy of going to the next grade? We have to have some tests. How do we decide who is worthy of getting this degree, or this other degree, or this license? There must be some test. One of the most beautiful ayat of the Quran is the one in Surah Hujarat. I believe it's verse 13. And interesting enough is that in this surah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He speaks to different people sometimes. And there are depths and bawatin and inner meanings in each of these verses. But sometimes He's speaking, for example, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe. Sometimes He's speaking to every single person. Believe or don't believe. Ya ayyuhan nas, every single person on this earth. This is a message to you. And in this verse it says, Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. You're familiar with this verse. We created you, mankind, all. O mankind, we created you from a single male and female. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا. And we made you into different nations and tribes. لِتَعَارَفُوا. So that you may know one another, so that you may have an identity. So first of all, there's a couple of things that are happening in this verse. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He's rounding up all of humanity, 8 billion people. Listen, 8 billion people. You all came from the same origin. In this dhakar and untha. You all came from this Adam and Hawa, for example. From this Adam and Eve. You all are brothers and sisters and alike in this origin. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ. We made you intentionally different in your languages, in your cultures, in your where you reside, so that you can have an identity. But then He brings it back to the point. Even though you have the same origin, and that now you may have these differences, أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. The one who has the most taqwa in the eyes of Allah, this is the most noble of you. This is the best of you. So He sets the stage here that despite all the differences that human beings may possess, what makes a person better is their taqwa. Their piety. What is this piety? How do we achieve this piety? It means to guard ourselves from the bad things and to do the good things, in a nutshell. However, if we look also at Surah Al-Mulk, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expresses that death and life are a reality, and then expresses why He created death and life, then we understand this role of taqwa. خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I created death and life. Why? So that I may test you. So the test is the purpose. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need to test me? He explains, أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Which one of you is going to be the best when it comes to their actions? So this world serves as this purpose of a playing field of test, of a major examination. And the time that a person goes through more difficulties and has a harder test his reward is greater. And so what Ayatollah Jawad Yamali in his class was saying was that when there are forces of the nafs, of the ego, or of shaitan, or outside forces of environment, things which make the test itself of the dunya in this world more difficult, that is the time that the reward gets even higher. So if we are seeking closeness to Allah, then we have to embrace the difficult times as well. Why is it that we don't find that the Ahlul Bayt in their most difficult times, that they are upset with difficulty? They're embracing their difficulty, embracing their difficult moments. They are rising to higher levels. And obviously Kabbalah is one of the excellent manifestations of that, where we can see that. So that difficulty creates that opportunity. There was a student, a person that came to the United States as a student and finished his schooling. He got his degree, and then he was starting a family, and he was beginning to wonder, should I stay in this land? Should I stay in this country? It's very difficult. There are a lot of difficulties in practicing Islam. And one of the most beautiful things about many Muslim countries, for example, the month of Ramadan is approaching. Hearing the adhan being called, everyone eating at the time of iftar. That these subtle things are so beautiful to see. Well, obviously there are challenges in this society when it comes to many of these things. Eating food, one of the most basic necessities, can be a challenge. What can I buy? What can I not buy? You need to read those ingredients. Does it have this in it? Does it have that in it? It makes it difficult even sometimes just to live. Do people understand hijab? Do they not understand all of these challenges? As a Muslim, I should have a value system which reflects who I am as a Muslim, my Islam, my religious values. But if society doesn't accept or rejects my value, how do I deal with this? It makes it difficult. And we're actually living in a time where there are certain societal values or things which are being projected on to people, to children, which makes it even more difficult. So anyway, he had this question. He said, should I leave and come and take my family? And he was asking an alim, and this alim gave him some advice. He said to him, are you looking for the easy way out? You just don't want to have to deal with the problems? Because this problem could be your opportunity. Then that setting, the level of iman that you can reach in this setting could be much higher than anywhere else. Because of that difficulty. Because of that test. And he made him think differently about that. Obviously, we have a concept where no one is told to go into a situation because it's difficult and you're going to fall into haram. If you have the ability and the will to be able to have the fortitude and the capability to navigate in that system and maintain your religious values, then yes, it's good. Even the concept itself of, for example, ta'arruf ba'd al-hijra, this is reflective of this. Where we have a concept in Islam where you do not migrate to a place, leave a Muslim land to go to a non-Muslim land if it will cause you to lose your faith, or cause your children and family to lose their faith. Why would a person? It means that there's nothing there more valuable than your faith. But if you can manage your faith, and if you can uphold your faith, then you can become a light, a lantern. You shed light for others. There's a hadith about a companion named Hamad al-Sindi, and he hears a riwayah that if you die amongst the kuffar, Yawm the day that you will be resurrected, that you will be resurrected with the people who you died amongst. So if you lived amongst disbelievers, that you will be raised up amongst disbelievers. So he comes to the Imam to ask him about this. And the Imams asked him, when you were there in Darul Kuf and these non-Muslim lands, do you share the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt? Do you share our affairs? Are you an example of the practice of Islam? He said, yes, absolutely. I don't miss my salat. I don't do things. I don't compromise my values. I don't eat haram. I hold fast to the teachings and I share that with other people. I become a lantern. I share with other people about these teachings. The Imam told him that on the day of judgment, you yourself will be raised as one ummah. On the day of judgment, you will be an ummah because of what you did in this land where you were surrounded by these difficulties. It's always interesting how people navigate these difficulties. There was a brother who he really wanted this job. It was something in IT. And in order for him to get this job, and he applied for the job, he sent in his resume, he finally got, a call, and he was very excited. This is his dream job. But the person who called him was this lady. He knew that the person who was going to interview him was going to be a lady, a female. And in normal customs, what's going to happen in that setting, when you walk into corporate America, someone's going to say, oh, very nice to meet you. And they're going to extend their hand to shake your hand. Now, if you're following that teaching of what was told to Hamad al-Sindi, then you know that in this setting, you will be losing your faith. This will be an example of losing your deen and religion, compromising your value. So do you compromise your value? Sometimes I hear people say, I don't want to make someone upset. Allah can be upset at me, that's okay. Ahlul Bayt that I love, they can be upset, that's okay. My Imam Mahdi that I'm waiting for, he can be upset, that's okay. But I don't want to make this person upset, and even if I don't even know that they will be upset. So they preemptively compromise their values. So he was worried about this situation, and he was thinking to himself, I really want this job. It was his dream job. He had been going to school all the time, everything leading up to this moment. And he wanted to get in, and he couldn't think of a solution. He was shy to tell this person, if they met, that, I'm Muslim, very nice to meet you, but I don't shake hands, for example. And so the solution that he came up with was that he would wear cast on his hands. So this is, I'm definitely not going to have any problems now. Because if there's a barrier, then it's jaiz. It's not a problem if there's a barrier between men and women, if it's like a glove or something. If there's not skin to skin physical contact. And so he goes to the interview. And according to him, he nailed it. He killed it. They loved him. He was #1 option. But he never got the call. And after a few weeks, he just wondered, like, I know that interview went well. I know I said everything right. I know my resume was stacked. And so he got curious and he inquired. And they said, you know, we really liked your resume, but we really needed to go with someone who could do a lot of typing right now. And we saw your situation. And so he kind of, as we say, shot himself in the foot. Sometimes how people navigate the difficulties are interesting. But one thing you have to understand is the test of your virtues and qualities are only evident at the time of difficulty. For example, someone thinks that they have sabr, they think they have patience, they think they have compassion. You don't know that until you get tested with that. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, oh, you have patience. Let me take this away from you. Now do you have patience? Let me take this away from you. Do you still have patience? Oh, you're kind. You think you're a kind person. This person will be so rude to you. Let me see if you still have kindness. We think that kindness and these good qualities are in us without being tested. A reason why Allah says, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ. You're going to deal with the bala, the difficulty. That's going to tell if you really have this quality or not. That's going to differentiate who is going up and who is not. The concept of seeking nearness to Allah is only evident at that moment. Every time there is a fork in the road, this is an opportunity. This was what he was saying. Shaitan, in this environment where you're surrounded by all kinds of tests and makes it more difficult, the reward is so great for the person who can maintain and achieve success and maintain their deen, maintain their faith. This particular issue, I'm using this as an example because oftentimes for mu'mineen who consider themselves believers, pious, practicing, when it comes to this matter, they often struggle. The matter I'm talking about, shaking hands with touching someone who's not mahram. And it's interesting because again, Islam has set solutions not just for a group of people, for society. Think about one of the, making relevant this concept, think about one of the movements which is very prevalent right now, the Me Too movement. Many of the issues that exist in the Me Too movement, if people if kept their hands to themselves, this would not even exist. But this is when man tries to decide what's right. This is when the nafs tries to decide, I think this should be okay and that much should not be okay. Allah says, I know you better than you. There are guidelines that I'm going to prevent from these things from ever happening. When people try to say Muslim women are oppressed, it is one of the if you reflect, it is a truly, it's a silly thought. Because Muslim women are free from being touched and being hugged and being handled because of this freedom that Islam gives them. That is a freedom. It is backwards to think that freedom is what we are seeing, which results in a movement to prevent it from happening. It is nonsensical to think that this is a freedom. But this is again getting distant from the values which Allah has set. And as Muslims, we have to be able to better see how beautiful the values of Islam are. How much they are a solution for the problems of humanity. We have to be that example, that light in society, that ummah that gets risen up on the Day of Judgment. There was an interfaith event, and one of the ulama was a Sayyid. He from New York. And in this interfaith event, one of the ladies, she went to shake his hand. And he said, very nice to meet you. I don't shake hands, but it's very nice to meet you. And he put his hand on his heart like this. And she said, oh, you're Jewish. And he was wearing full labas, Not exactly. Why would you think that I'm Jewish anyway? Just curious. So because all of the Orthodox rabbis, they don't shake hands. And in that particular community, they were practicing Jews. And they did not shake hands. It's not just a Muslim concept or Islamic concept. And he said that was interesting because this woman, first of all, she was not at all bothered or offended. She appreciated and respected him more. But she had met Muslim after Muslim after Muslim who said, oh, no problem, and they shook hands. But she met rabbi after rabbi after rabbi who all abstained. And so it became in her mind this association that, oh, these are practicing men of faith who do not shake hands. Muslims, you don't know what kind of apple you're going to get. So this becomes that test. And if we are following that tradition of the Ahl al-Bayt, the more difficult, the more we shine. It talks about there are different kinds of mu'mineen. Those best mu'mineen are the ones that with more difficulty, like gold, the more the difficult, the more they suffer, the more they shine. Put them in the more difficult circumstance, and they will show you their iman even more. They'll show you their compassion even more. They'll show you their kindness even more. They'll show you their humility even more. The situations don't break them. They rise to the occasion. One of the things that sometimes gets lost for believers, especially following the Ma'asumeen and the teachings of the Ahl al-Bayt, is the infallibility of the Ahl al-Bayt. Their isma. Sometimes there is this kind of approach or mentality, well, that's Imam Ali and he was ma'asum. I am just a poor sinner, so don't have any expectations from me. But this is the reason why that their companions are very important examples. Hazrat Abbas is a pinnacle example. He's not one of the Imams, but he is one of the righteous, pious, muttaqi companions. So we can't use that excuse anymore. We can't say, oh, they're just ma'soomeen and everyone else has problems. Even in their isma, it is a choice. The ma'soomeen are ma'soom by choice. At every fork in the road, to do good or bad, they choose to do what is good. If we have the idea in our head that the ma'soomeen were somehow magically prevented from doing any wrong, then we have the wrong idea of what a ma'soom is. The fact that they always chose to do what's right, that's that human side of them that we're supposed to be following. Sometimes this is not a tangible answer for people. Sometimes it's still difficult. How can that be? How can someone always do what's right? And we understand that they have a depth of ma'rifah and understanding as well. So let's take, for example, a child that has little understanding. He might see fire. He might say, I wonder what's going to happen if I touch it. But if I ask any of you, would you like to lay down in a fire? You'd say no. No, thank you, Shaykh. You come here and telling us to lay in the fire? No, thank you. You wouldn't want to do that because you understand. And if I ask you tomorrow and the next day and the next day, you would keep saying no. Why? Because you understand that this is harmful and you are able to stay away from it. Now put that into the context of life. And everything which is haram becomes like that fire. That is who the ma'soomeen are. And every time they see that wrong, they stay away from that choice. And they will always choose the right. It's an example for you and I of what to follow. This is not limited to the Imams, this practice. This is not limited to those great examples, the Malik Ashtars, the Hazrat Abul Fadl Abbas. This is the reason why specifically we study the seerah of the ulama as well. Because it's an important reminder for us to see those living examples of this is what it looks like to practice that taqwa. You have a few minutes?
No, it's not time.
Oh.
No. We have about 15, 17 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, we study the seerah of the ulama. We look at their lives, people who practice their religion and upheld these values to see that this is a reality. This is not some phantom concept. This is not something that is mythical. This is something very real. I remember the example of when we were in the, when I was in the Hawza studying as a student, and I was younger. At the time I was a teenager, about 14, 15 years old. And one of our teachers really encouraged us to try to take advantage of meeting Ayatollah Bahjah. May Allah have mercy on his soul. And I did not know who he was at first. I was a young, new Hosa student. In Farsi they say Juje Talibah. Yeah, you're just a little chick of a student. You're just starting out. But I took this advice, alhamdulillah, and I went to try to see and try to meet him. Every time that I went to the masjid where he would pray, which was not far from, it was inside of the bazaar, not far from, or across the street from, the haram of the sister of Imam, Hazrat Masuma sallallahu alayhi. Every time I went there just to pray, to see, to maybe have a conversation, it was being packed. There was no room. All the way till the entire place would be filled, and the door would be open, and the line would go outside of the door into the street. And that would be filled behind them until there was absolutely no room to be properly connected. And then, so after a while, I thought to myself, I'm never going to get the opportunity to meet this person at this rate. So then I learned that Fajr time was a little bit of a better time. But not every Fajr. Even then I learned that Friday was the best time because it was holiday. A lot of people didn't come. So that was the absolute best time. So I went one Friday morning, and he had a tradition where after he would pray his prayers, he would go to the haram and he would recite ziyarat at the haram of Hazrat Masuma, and then he would go and walk towards his house. And there was always this entourage of people surrounding him whenever he went anywhere. At this point, towards the later part of his life, he was he had become very well known. And as we're walking, and this is probably my first real encounter with him, and there's so many people, and people are asking important political questions, important fiqh questions, and questions about, Imam Zaman and the Mahdi and the end times and these kinds of things. And then there was just a handful of people, and I have an opportunity to ask a question. Now, in retrospect, I may have asked a different question. But at the moment, as a young teenager, the question that came to my mind was, how old are you? So I asked Ayatollah Bahjah, how old are you? And what he said to me was, age is defined by how close you become to Allah in your lifetime. Meaning that if you live for 100 years, but you don't become closer to Allah in that 100 years, what have you done? What have you lived? If you live the short life of 10 or 20 years, but you use that time to become closer to Allah, then you have truly lived. There's one of the other Urafa explained this concept called Umr Mufid, a beneficial life. Not just having life, not just being present like a lump on a log, but utilizing your time, utilizing your energy, utilizing your mind, utilizing your opportunities, embracing your difficulties, embracing your hardship, overcoming them. If you do this, then you're truly, then it matters. The number does not matter. And so I sat at that time, and so as we're walking, And I'm beginning to think to myself, my gosh, my mind just exploded. I was not prepared for that answer. And also, he didn't tell me his exact age. But I was very much reflecting on how profound that meeting was. These are examples that we have to learn from. People who we have to take from their tangible examples and make them a part of our lives. I especially want to stress the importance and emphasis of doing this for young people and doing this at a young age. Ayatollah Bahjat rahmatullah alayhi was someone who was known for his piety from those who knew him from a very young age. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was Ameen amongst the people. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had qualities and virtues of Iman long before he was Nabi or Rasul, before he was the messenger of God. He did this in his youth. And doing those things at that time, part of the reason why the progress can be so significant, if a person understands, is because there are a lot of difficulties associated during that age. Some particular trials and tribulations of adolescence. So if a person is prepared, they have the ability to take advantage of things from early on. And this is a very important lesson to learn from the Ahlul Bayt. When I even reflect upon myself being here with you today, I think we have to understand how critical it is to be that lantern and that ummah in this society. My parents were people who came from non-Muslim background. My mother came from a Catholic background, and she was raised in Catholic school and in the Catholic Church. My parents were both Christian. The driving questions of life, many of them, and their answers is what eventually led them to seek Islam. The influence of Malcolm X was, I always encourage people, if you want to understand Islam in America, you have to understand his life as being one of the most important Muslims or influential Muslims in this country. And they were also influenced by him, even though he was assassinated before they became Muslim. One of the things which really stood out to them in Islam was that Islam was a religion of solution, of justice. That in a society where there's economic inequality, racial injustice, that Islam is a religion which provides justice to everyone. Akramakum indallah atqakum. Despite your differences, who is more noble? The one who's more pious is more noble. It didn't matter what your race or economic status was for Islam. So this justice, which Imam Ali alayhi salam says, justice is the thing which the entire universe is centered upon. It's the mizan and scale which the universe is built upon. If it gets shaken, then there will always be problems. This justice is what they were drawn to. Especially as in that time, 1979, and around that time in early 80s where they became Muslim, they were also very attracted to what they heard about, what they were hearing about Imam Khomeini and the Islamic Revolution of Iran. This prompted them to go and travel after the revolution to Iran and to study there in the early 80s. And they were driven and drawn to these teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. But I want to rewind all of that to a particular point. And that was in a checkout line where a very close friend of my mother's, who they had already embraced Islam, and she's standing in the checkout line, and you're ordering something. Sometimes you might say, have a little conversation with whoever's there. And there happened to be some students there who were followers of the Ahlul Bayt, and they greeted, they were polite, they were nice, and they gave salams. Oh, you're Muslim, and they spoke, my name is such and such, what's your name? And they greeted each other. And the conversation came to where they were from and something about the Ahlul Bayt. And at this time, my parents were new Muslims and they had not even heard much about the Ahlul Bayt. And so this was one of the first times that this was introduced to them. And this person became a friend and a long-term friend eventually. But that moment of kindness and conversation, of being welcoming, that moment sparked for them a beginning of a new study where their group began to study and inquire more about Islam. This led them to eventually accept and begin to become followers of the Ahlul Bayt. When I was born, they were learning about Imam Husayn, and so they named me Husayn for this reason. And Allahu A'lam, but maybe none of this happens and maybe I'm not here. If someone who was here, who had knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt, and who had understanding of the Ahlul Bayt, and who understood that value, did not bother to share that message. Imam Husayn was willing to share that message at the cost of his life. And we, for much less, will not be willing to share sometimes. If we are to be a part of this country and society, we must be that lantern which sheds light by sharing the message of the Ahlul Bayt. I'm not talking about necessarily being evangelical. I'm not talking about being like Jehovah's Witness. I'm not talking about knocking on anyone's door at 6 in the morning. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about, number one, you be the practicing example of the Ahlul Bayt. That's number one. Then when the opportunities are there, share that message with those who are around you, your neighbors, those other people, your colleagues. and become that person who is a beacon of light, just like the Ahlul Bayt are for all of us, inshallah. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all that success and tawfiq to be the true supporters and the true followers of the Mahdi and the Imam of our time. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring healing and bring faraj to all of those who are mustadafeen all throughout the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala especially bring healing to all of those who have suffered, especially the recent tragedy in Kara, and those who were killed and martyred, and the recent tragedy in New Zealand, and all of those who were martyred. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring ease for them and their families, elevate their station in the hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us all to be the best examples of light and peace in this world, inshallah. For the souls of those people who have passed away, after salawat, please recite Fatih. Salawat.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوسيم، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيد نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم سائر شهداء كربلاء خصوصا سيدي مولاي أبو الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا سلطان يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى يا رضا، السلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وزبورك. السلام عليكم وعلى آبائه الطيبين الطاهرين، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا أمير المؤمنين وأبناءهم معصومين لا حجج الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. يا محسن ولا تاك المصير. أنت المحسن على المصير وتجاوز عن المصير. الله أكبر.
الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقول وجه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. فذلك الله خير. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربنا أعطنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى على محمد وآله الأطهار. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته في أمتي وارفع درجته بحول الله وبقوته أحمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا رحمن الدنيا والآخرة ارحم من ليس له الدنيا والآخرة. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك ونجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على
أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أشهد أن عليا رضي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. وأحسن غدتك المسير. أنت المحسن وأنا المسير. وتجاوز عن المسير. الله أكبر.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا جاء النصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفر إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. لله وبقوته أقيم ويحفظ. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. وذلك الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك الرحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. وصل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي فأجول في طلبه البلدان فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران. لا أدري في سهل هو أم في جبل أم في أرض أم في سماء أم في بر أم في بحر وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله واجعل يا رب رزقك لي واسعا ومطلبه سهلا ومأخذه غريبا ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. عجل در طرف آقای امام زمان و سلامتیشون. امشب که ما دور هم جمع شدیم we are getting together for the birthday of all these معصومین. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for شفای تمام مریضان. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for رحمت for مغفورین مرحومین، پدر مادر والدین، our fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers, all those people who ask us for dua. انشاءالله الله سبحانه و تعالی به حق محمد و آل محمد شفای تمام مریضان رو در این شهر عنایت بفرماید. الله مغفورین ما رو ببخش و بیامرزون. انشاءالله با هم دیگه زمزمه کنیم دعای فرج و دعای سلامتی آقای امام زمان رو. بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. اللهم بالولی الجد الحسن صلواتك في كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توبا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم سائر شهداء كربلاء خصوصا سيدي مولاي أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا سلطان يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى والرضا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الأسر والزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسأل الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك. السلام عليكم وعلى آباء الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.